Hello guys, welcome to my deck profile from Nirvana. I played this deck at the WCC featuring FRF from Different Fight. I reached the top 8 and lost there. And I'm going to show you today my deck profile. I also changed a little bit, but I'm gonna go into it later. This is my right line, not playing the Trickster, cause I really appreciate the draw, and you have so much draw engine in this deck, you will always get to another Trickster, and even if you don't, you're totally fine with it. And this is pretty standard, won't go into it. And then of course 3 times the right line, pretty standard. Then the special tech, I play 1 of this to discard an overdress card and draw 2 cards. Reason is I don't play Aruna for the booster of Trickster, cause that card is, in my opinion, not that great, cause it's only a combo card for Urga, this Urga. And just to play 3 copies of 1 card to make this play a little bit better is just not worth. I will come to that later too. Then 2 Valiente. I am thinking about putting a 3rd in it, but if you play only 2, it's also totally fine. Then 4 copies of Urger is very great to countercharge and to just overdress vanilla. You don't even need to attack with the Trickster. You can just overdress him over the Trickster and he gets the 10k shield value. That's the most important thing about him, and he also stays at 20k at the opponent's turn, so that's also very nice. Then the best card in the deck, Arcs. Definitely a 4-off. You also want to see him on your 2nd turn. You want to mulligan your whole hand except maybe an Nirvana, but you definitely need him. You need to resolve him like 2 times, or at least once, 2 times optimal, 3 times maybe in the game. So you have the sustain in the hand and you can shield and play the late game. Speaking of late game, there are 4 Byrinas. Everybody plays only 2, cause if you draw 1, you can search 1, and this card is treated like a pretty bad card. But in my list I play 4 of Togashirashis. And you get him into Soul, which enables you to use Verena as well as Urga's skill. And I would never play 4 of Togashirashi just to use Urga's skill like once or twice a game at max. And then you have still Soul left for Verena, and in the end game, late game, it's just a really strong effect to use his skill to Soul Blast 2 and retire a card, cause you can retire anything on the field, like front row, back row, grade 3, grade 2, grade 1, you can retire everything. And in the worst case, you can just vanilla call him, and with Nirvana it gets a 20k beat stick at least. Then I already spoiled it for Togashirashi, cause Verena and Urga, it's pretty nice. You need the Soul, definitely a 4-off. Except you don't play 4 Vyrinas or 3. Then the 4 usual Tricksters, that should be self-explanatory, as well as 4 Perfect Guards. Then to the trigger lineup, 1 over trigger, then 4 heals, also staple. Then I play only 7 crits. In the tournament I played 8. But I cut 1 trigger down for 4 fronts. Reason is, in the early game the crit trigger is pretty nice and does a lot of value and helps you with the tempo playstyle of the deck. But in late game, crit trigger is pretty nice, but cause I play much into the late game with the draws and with 4 Vyrinas, I like 4 fronts more, cause you can push more and at the same time get the opponent to discard more shields, cause you got 10k on the whole front row and not just on 1. If he perfect guards or the guard something, you pull a crit trigger, so it's like a double value, and in late game he will always guard the crit trigger. So but it's more like a flavor, how you like to play it. It depends on you, and with the next expansion you would just cut these 4 maybe for the new crit triggers to put this into the soul, because it goes really well with the 4 Virenas. Or you just play 12 crits. You could also do that in this deck, but it needs some testing. Like, it's just revealed yesterday when I record this, so we will see. In the tournament I played only 3 Virenas and 2 of this card. At first I thought this was a grade 2 aura, and that would be just crazy, because in the turn 2 you want your arcs, and if you don't have an arcs you can discard something like Virena and hopefully draw arcs or something. But I barely resolved this card efficiently, because if you got into the late game you don't want to use that card. You want to use that card if you clock your hand with too many of the Virenas and Overdress cards, because they have always low shield value. And then you can just play this card and cycle through your cards and hopefully draw maybe some shields or some things that can draw again, like arcs. So there's also a fear to deck out, so you have to be really resourceful with your overdress cards. Last thing I want to show you guys is my mulligan, how I did in the tournament, and I do as different fights as in his deck profile about this deck. It doesn't matter what kind of hand you have, if you don't have an arcs, mulligan everything. It depends always on how you draw with some special things, but the only thing I keep in hand is the Persona Ride, because if you have bad luck, it's possible that you just don't draw any Persona Rides, or they go into damage zone. So just keep one safe in hand and mulligan everything all the time if you don't have an arcs. If you have an arcs, there is a little bit of tags or things you can do. Like with this hand, everything back. Like an Urga to keep would be nice, but if you don't have an arc, an Urga, yeah, like you're gonna draw into it anyways. You just need the arcs. Like, that's the whole playstyle. Then the next 5 cards would be this hand. It's pretty clocked, like you see. Hopefully we draw the order next. But yeah, this would be actually a pretty bad hand. So with 5 hands you would draw 6, then you would drive check, then you would draw again, and then drive check this card. So in turn 3 you would have one. Okay, now I didn't shuffle these back in, but you get the point. Then I will simulate like a hand right now. Like let's say this is your draw. These are all pretty good cards, but the problem is if you have too many of the overdress cards, you can clock pretty hard in the early game when you want to push, because you don't have a second trickster. And with this hand you have the problem that you definitely want a second trickster, because one you can call when you ride the grade 2 above, and with this hand you want to call arcs first priority with a trickster to draw 2, and then you can also drop an Urga, because Urga is pretty nice to push and hard to come over, and got the 15k shield which can guard the early push for free pretty much. And you don't need to use the effect all the time, just play more around the 15k shield he got. That's much more important. So you would mulligan these 2, you would keep these 3, because you got the soul, you got the arcs, and Urga is always nice in the deck. So I will shuffle pretty quick. Okay, then draw 2 more cards. That's very great. So you have 2 costs for for riding from the right deck, and if you clock your hand you also have this card, and worst case you just discard this card with Nirvana or for something else, a PG. Like, you only play 1 of these, so it's totally fine. And you would draw 6 cards, perfect. Like, you have to take some damage in the first in the first turns, but it's totally fine. Smart is when you guard the second attack, because you want one counterblast for arcs, and the second attack you pretty much want to guard if you can, if you have like a trigger somewhere, like a heal trigger, and that's it. Thank you for watching. The last part wasn't recorded due to some technical issues, but make sure to subscribe, like for more content, and post your thoughts in the comments down below. Enjoy the extra bloopers here on the end.
Subscribe.
Please subscribe to my channel. I bring very big deck profiles and some good remote duels, and I will play much tournament, and I will upload frequently to this channel, and follow Twitch on www.twitch/tv something, and then on Terratrox. Or look in the description. Das ist die ganz am Ende dazu.